Module 11, the circulatory system. The formed elements in blood. It is time to take a closer look at the cells within the blood. The most common cells are erythrocytes, or red blood cells, comprising 95% of the formed elements in blood. Again, they look like discs with dimples in the center, one on top and one underneath. Erythrocytes are very small for cells, being only 7.5 micrometers in diameter. Why do they have such a unique shape? Well, it's a perfect shape for transporting oxygen. Their biconcave shape actually has more surface area than if these cells didn't have these dimples. Extra surface area provides more locations for gases to diffuse in and out. Being thicker on the edges than in the center also allows the cells to be a bit more flexible, folding a bit if needed when they move through tiny blood vessels. In the last section, I mentioned that hemoglobin is an iron-containing protein complex which behaves as a carrier for oxygen. Its iron content is actually what gives blood its red color. It is made up of 4 protein chains called globins. Though they appear to be balled up, each chain is precisely folded into a specific shape. In the middle of each globin is a flat molecule called a heme, and an iron atom is in the middle of each heme. These iron atoms are able to bind to one oxygen molecule, so one molecule of hemoglobin can bind with 4 molecules of oxygen. When all 4 hemes of a hemoglobin molecule are bound to oxygen, that molecule turns bright red. When the hemes have released their oxygen, the molecule becomes a darker red. This is a unique factor of erythrocytes. No other cells in the body contain hemoglobin molecules. Another unique feature is that erythrocytes don't have nuclei. They are anucleate. That means that they do not have a strong metabolism. They cannot produce much cellular machinery. They even cannot use the oxygen they transport. Why is that? Well, without proper cell machines, the only way they can produce ATP energy is via glycolysis, which is a process that doesn't require oxygen. That process cannot make much ATP, but it can do it without requiring oxygen. And that's a good thing, or otherwise they will use up the oxygen they are supposed to deliver. If they did, it would kind of be like a pizza delivery guy who eats a few slices of pizza before he brings it to your house. Because red blood cells do not have a nucleus, they cannot survive very long, dying after about 4 months. Thus, your body needs to be continually making more to replace them. And it does. Do you remember where they are made? You already learned that they are made in the bone marrow, and you can make about 2 million red blood cells each second. That's a lot, but amazingly, that's about the same amount that die off every second, too. If your blood is not able to carry as much oxygen as needed by the body, then a condition called anemia results. This happens when the body does not have as many normal red blood cells, or if there's a lack of hemoglobin, which is often a result of a lack of iron in your diet. A person can have fewer red blood cells if their body does not make as many as they should be making, if they've lost a great deal of blood due to bleeding, or if they have a parasitic infection. Anemia can also result if a person's hemoglobin doesn't do its job. A disease called sickle cell disease is a result of a genetic fault resulting in improperly shaped hemoglobin. The misshapen hemoglobin will clump together and the red blood cell will fold on itself, forming a sickle shape. These odd shapes, then, can cause blockage in the tiniest of blood vessels, blocking blood supply to parts of the body. You can imagine that this disease could result in more serious problems. Many of the primary symptoms of anemia can be caused by other effectors. Therefore, the best way to determine if someone has this condition is to test the blood using a hematocrit blood test. This test determines the percentage of red blood cells in a person's blood. If it is significantly below 44 to 48% in males or 38 to 45% in females, then that indicates anemia. There's also a blood test called a hemoglobin test, which can tell you how much hemoglobin is in the red blood cells. If the test results are below 12 to 16 grams of hemoglobin per 100 milliliters, then that indicates anemia too. One of the best ways to prevent anemia is to make sure you get enough iron in your diet, or take supplements if necessary. Yet there are also lots of other vitamins and minerals which are necessary to make erythrocytes. B vitamins, vitamins C and E, and minerals such as copper, cobalt, manganese, and zinc. Though anemia prevents a person's cells from receiving enough oxygen, it doesn't affect the release of carbon dioxide from the cells. That's because those cells make about 1 molecule of carbon dioxide for every molecule of oxygen they use. Only about a fourth of the carbon dioxide is carried away by hemoglobin. And what is carried by it is bound not to the iron, but to the globin molecules themselves. The rest of the carbon dioxide gas is carried in the blood plasma because that gas is more soluble in plasma than oxygen is. Another reason has to do with how carbon dioxide becomes chemically altered in the blood. You see, red blood cells have an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase that behaves as a catalyst for this chemical change. Carbon dioxide and water form carbonic acid, and carbonic acid can break up into bicarbonate and a hydrogen ion. Well, most carbon dioxide in the blood travels around in the form of bicarbonate. The closer the blood is to the cells, the more reaction moves to the right, forming more and more bicarbonate. Then when blood moves to the lungs, the reaction moves in reverse so that more carbon dioxide gas is in the blood. Can you see why? It's because the lungs are where carbon dioxide is released out of the body when you exhale. Well, now it's time to discuss the leukocytes, or white blood cells. I'm using these words interchangeably so that you may become familiar with both terms. The main job of white blood cells is to fight off infection in the body. They're not as common as red blood cells, with a ratio of 1 white blood cell for every 700 red ones. But white blood cells are much larger. They are nucleated, and they can perform many duties. Most leukocytes are able to move around on their own. They aren't dependent on blood flow for movement like red blood cells are. They move via a process called amoeboid movement. This involves extending a portion of the cell membrane out, forming a pseudopod, and then causing their cytoplasm to flow into it. This amazing ability lets them morph through tiny pores in the smallest blood vessels, moving into the tissue. This process is called diapedesis. Diapedesis is passage of white blood cells through pores in blood vessels to get into the tissue spaces. White blood cells need to move out of the blood vessels because the tissue spaces of the body are where their work happens. They are drawn to dead cells and invading cells and foreign material via chemotaxis. Chemotaxis is the attraction of cells to chemical stimuli. Say you've been around a friend who was sick. Your body may have picked up a few bacteria or viruses that made your friend sick. Now those invaders are moving around your body tissues. Thankfully, your white blood cells are attracted to them via chemotaxis. They are drawn to the infection and squeeze their way out of the bloodstream by diapedesis. And they work quickly to battle the infection before you have a chance to get ill. There are actually 5 different types of white blood cells, each with a different job. Leukocytes can be divided into 2 classes, granulocytes and agranulocytes. Now, under normal circumstances, white blood cells appear clear. They only look colored like this when they have been stained and looked at under a microscope. Granulocytes have vesicles that receive stain well, so you can see them under the microscope. This makes the cells appear grainy, hence the name granulocytes. Agranulocytes have vesicles as well, but they're very small and do not take in stain well. Thus, you cannot see the vesicles under the microscope. There are 3 types of granulocytes. The first is a neutrophil. These are the most common leukocytes in the body. They have a lobed nucleus and small granules that are not very dense. Neutrophils are the white blood cells that reach the scene of infection first. They are drawn to foreign invaders via chemotaxis and can undergo phagocytosis. Phagocytosis means literally cell eating. It is the process by which a cell engulfs and ingests a foreign or dead cell or cell part. So neutrophils will engulf foreign cells that are infecting tissue. They will also engulf dead cells too. Scientists believe that a neutrophil cell can engulf up to 10 bacteria before it dies. Do you know when you have an infected area on your skin, you often have white pus that forms there? That is primarily due to dead neutrophils. Pus is a mixture of dead or dying white blood cells, foreign cells such as bacteria, and fluid. Basophils make up the lowest percentage of granulocytes in the body. They are given that name because they are drawn to basic blue dye. You can identify basophils by their two-lobed nucleus, or the large granules that often make the nucleus hard to see. If you have an allergic reaction to something, basophils will increase in number. They release histamine and heparin, two chemicals to fight off that reaction. Histamine causes inflammation, and inflammation can be a good thing because it stimulates the immune system to help you fight off what you're allergic to. Heparin keeps blood from clotting in a local area. Again, this is helpful because if the blood clots, then white blood cells and other immune factors cannot get to the site to do their jobs. Heparin levels will eventually decrease though, so your body will let the blood eventually form a clot. Eosinophils are also uncommon, but are in larger quantities than basophils. They also have two-lobed nuclei, but their granules stain a reddish color. In fact, the prefix of their name, eos, means red. Eosinophils will also increase their amounts during an allergic reaction. Their job is to provide balance to the work of the basophils. They decrease inflammation. If your body is infected with a parasite, eosinophils will increase in numbers too. Among the agranulocytes, let's look at the lymphocytes first. They are a bit bigger than the red blood cells, yet they are the smallest of the leukocytes, although they are the second most common ones, too. Their nucleus stains a dark color, and a small halo of cytoplasm can be seen. Lymphocytes are involved with the lymph system. They produce antibodies that are proteins that are designed to attack foreign invaders. The last type of leukocyte is a monocyte. Monocytes are the largest of the white blood cells, yet are not very common. Their nucleus is shaped like a kidney bean, and they have lots of cytoplasm. These cells engulf invading organisms using phagocytosis, and they're much better at it than neutrophils. Scientists believe that each monocyte is able to devour up to 100 bacteria before they die. Monocytes move out of the bloodstream via diapedesis, and they remain in the tissues. They are called macrophages when they are in body tissues. Macrophage literally means big eater, and that's just what they do. You have lots of them in your lungs where they are called dust cells. They are there to engulf small particles that make it to the delicate lung tissue. Macrophages are also in your lymph tissue to help identify foreign invaders. Now, the formation of all of these formed elements in the blood is called hemopoiesis. By definition, hemopoiesis is the process by which the formed elements of blood are made in the body. It occurs in the red bone marrow, with the exception of lymphocyte production. During early development, lymphocytes leave the bone marrow and travel to the lymphatic tissue, where they are produced. All blood cells, no matter what type, are formed from one type of cell called hemocytoblasts, or stem cells. In fact, red bone marrow is filled with stem cells. Stem cells are just undifferentiated cells that can divide to produce daughter cells of any type of blood cell that's needed. But they aren't created randomly. Your body has a carefully controlled process to make sure you have just the right number of each type of blood cell you need. Module 11, the cardiovascular system. Experiment 11.1, examining a blood smear. We're going to take a closer look at blood cells by observing a blood smear, which is a prepared slide. So we're going to go ahead and take our slide and put that under the microscope at 40 power magnification. And at this point, you should just see lots and lots of tiny red dots. Those are erythrocytes. Go ahead and move it up to 100 power magnification. And those red dots should appear a little bit clearer. And now we're going to move it to 400 power magnification because there's actually a lot more going on than what you're seeing here right now. So at 400 power magnification, you want to do some focusing and see again that you're going to be looking at lots and lots of red dots. Those are the red blood cells, or erythrocytes. Red blood cells do not have nuclei, so you're not going to see any dots within those red blood cells. And they're the majority of cells found in blood, so that's why we're seeing so many. But there are a lot of other types of cells that we can see under this microscopic image. So what I want you to do at this point is, this is kind of the Where's Waldo portion of our lab. I want to move back to 100 power magnification. And we want to find some cells that are amidst those erythrocytes that look absolutely nothing like erythrocytes. So at 100 power right now, I'm going to focus, and I'm just going to move my slide up and down until I see something. It might be a darkish purplish color or a bluish color, and we're looking for something that is different, like this one right here. And once you find something, go ahead and put it back on higher magnification so you can take a closer look. What we're hopefully going to be able to identify then are the leukocytes. They look nothing like the red blood cells, and they're very difficult to find, but make it kind of a hide and seek kind of thing and see if you can find basophils, eosinophils, monocytes. And when you do find one, draw an image of that in your lab notebook. The monocytes are going to be the biggest cells, so they should be much larger in comparison to the red blood cells. Lymphocytes are going to look kind of like they're mostly nucleus. There should be mostly stuff inside of them. Neutrophils are the most common, and they have a lot of lobes. They're a multi-lobe nucleus. Refer to the diagram 11.5 in your text to help you identify what you think they are. The basophils are very granular with a very hard to see nucleus, so you'll see lots of dots within those. Eosinophils are rare. You may not find those at all, but they have the bright red granules within inside of them. Now, another thing you want to try to look at, again, each time you're searching for a new one, it may be helpful to move back to 100 power magnification. But you also want to look for clumps of darkly stained little tiny dots that are smaller than the erythrocytes, and those are platelets. So again, you're going to have to be going back and forth from the 100 power magnification to the 400 power magnification while you're hunting for these. But again, make this kind of like a Where's Waldo experience, because the more you're able to see, the more you're going to learn. And so it's really kind of interesting to see the number difference between the different kinds of cells as well as their appearance and how that is different. Once you've done all that, go ahead and clean everything up and put it away.